I don't care about you. I just want your vote.
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Begone!
Are we going to have a good show? I think we're going to have a good show. I know we're going to have a good show specifically because today there were far too many stories to fit into 2 hours of the program. And when that happens, it tends to lead to an excellent program. So I'm looking forward to it. Cenk Uygur will be joining us in the second hour to talk about Alex Jones having some pretty harsh words for President Donald Trump. Yet another Trump supporter has turned on the president, and we'll give you the details on what's going on. Essentially, Alex Jones is saying, yo, bro, I'm not in a cult. Are you not? No, we'll wait until we get to that topic. I wanted to save that story specifically for Cenk because I know he's gonna have a lot to say about it. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's currently transpiring in Syria as Israel has taken ownership of some of the bombings and airstrikes that have taken place in Damascus and other parts of Syria. What's behind that? Why is Israel bombing yet another one of their neighbors? We're going to talk about the latest Trump attacks against his own supporters. Really looking forward to sharing that with you. Anyway, a lot to get to. I don't want to waste any more time, but if you're wondering, man, the main show team, like they're really busting their butts. Okay, what can I do to support them? You can like and share the stream. That's a really easy way to help us in the algorithm and share the message of TYT. And if you got some extra bucks to spare each month, you can become a paying member of the show by going to tyt.com/join or just smash that join button. It's coming. It's coming. Smash it. There we go. Smash that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. All right, without further ado, let's talk about the latest in this Epstein debacle.
I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled? Why do you think that is?
Well, that was President Donald Trump last night, once again, complaining about the fact that his administration is getting chided by their own supporters over this whole Epstein cover-up. Now, this morning, Trump also went completely nuclear multiple times, by the way, and repeatedly insulted his own supporters. But before we get to that, let's actually see more of what Trump had to say just last night.
He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.
Epstein was never really a big factor in terms of life. Oh, okay. I mean, Epstein was a big factor when it comes to, I don't know the exact number of young girls who were essentially assaulted and raped because of what Epstein was up to. But I would venture to say that that's a pretty big deal. And if Trump is wondering why people care about this so much, and let me just say, for anyone who does care about this, whether you're on the left, whether you're part of the MAGA crowd who's furious with the Trump administration over this Epstein cover-up right now, I'm gonna keep it real. On this issue specifically, these are my people. because they understand the gravity of this situation. So yes, there are all sorts of theories, right? One of those theories that has a ton of circumstantial evidence to support it is this idea that Jeffrey Epstein was working for intelligence. Alex Acosta, who prosecuted him and gave him a sweetheart deal, had said on the record, and even till this day does not deny, that he was told to back off because Epstein is intelligence. Now, the question is, which intelligence are we talking about? And the circumstantial evidence that I'm referring to tends to point to Mossad. It could be possible that Epstein was working with other intelligence organizations as part of a blackmail operation in order to implicate powerful governmental officials, certainly here in the United States, in this blackmail scheme, right? Now, why would Mossad want that? Why would any intelligence organization want that? Especially as it pertains to American politicians. If you're asking that question, my answer is, are you kidding me? Of course, that blackmail is incredibly powerful in essentially allowing for foreign countries to steer US foreign policy. So Trump, that's the reason why it's a big deal. Another reason why it's a big deal is because members of your administration, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, obviously Pam Bondi multiple times over the last several months on cable television, has said, we've got the goods. We're going to show you the goods. We're going to release the Epstein files. This is a child pedophilia ring, and then all of a sudden, oh no, there's no client list. No, there's no client. Yeah, apparently there was no evidence that would incriminate the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So let me just end that rant and just talk about what happened this morning, because today Trump bashed his own base in a long post on Truth Social. So bear with me as I read some of the relevant excerpts. He writes that the Democrats' new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. No, we will not forever call it the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. I do want to call what you're doing the Jeffrey Epstein cover up, but I'll continue with what he had to say. And my past supporters, he's referring to people who voted for him who are currently upset with him. My past supporters have bought into this BS, hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. No, they were conned by you and your administration. And they have woken up to that fact. And I feel terrible for them because they genuinely had trust in the Trump administration as it pertains to the release of these so-called Epstein files. There's more from Trump's post on Truth Social. He says, I have had more success in 6 months than perhaps any president in our country's history. And all these people want to talk about, with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Democrats, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Now, look, I actually don't feel comfortable giving the Democratic Party a ton of credit right now because they were in power during the last administration. If they really wanted to release the Epstein files, they could have done it. And now they're really capitalizing on this divide within the Trump base. It's all for political reasons, and that grosses me out as well. I want honesty, and I want to see the files. I want to see the client list. I want to know which American politicians were implicated in this situation. More importantly, by the way, all of the individuals who participated in doing this to minors, to young girls, should also be prosecuted, no? Or are we just comfortable with allowing powerful people to get away with victimizing girls like that? I'm not okay with that, even if this has nothing to do with Epstein working for an intelligence organization, which I think he did. But let's say that that's not the case. The injustice, the unfairness, and the lies is what really bothers me, and I suspect really bothers the portion of the Trump base that has now turned on him. And now he's chiding them. He's making them out to be the bad guys when your administration is the administration that promised to release the goods and reneged on that promise. It's the most brazen lie, told repeatedly by the Trump administration, and now they're getting called out on it. Final excerpt from his post. He says, let these weaklings, again, he's talking about his supporters, let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore. Now, the biggest mistake anyone can make in any context is thinking that they are infallible, they're unstoppable. What Trump is failing to realize is that his power comes from his base. You lose your base, you lose everything, homeboy. You do. And it is incredible to me how far he is willing to go to engage in this unwillingness to release the Epstein files. And that begs the question, why? Why is that happening? So let's check out some of the replies to that post on Truth Social so you'll get a little sense of how people are reacting to it. Now, there were a few comments supporting the president sprinkled in, but there were a lot of comments critical of him, including one that reads, "Why was Epstein in prison then? How about Ghislaine? For a hoax? I don't think so. This is the hill we all die on." Another individual says, "Why is the Epstein case so important to the MAGA movement? It's why Trump won in 2016. He promised to rip the mask off the globalist elite and drain their filthy swamp. If the GOP betrays that mission again, at least a third of the base walks, and they will lose in 2026, guaranteed." So I know that we all know that Trump has lied to his base on a whole host of issues. But you guys have to understand that right now we live in this like weird bifurcated media landscape where people exist in bubbles and they're only exposed to certain information. And so when it comes to economic policies, it could get dense, it could get really difficult to follow. The complexities make it easier for the Trump administration to get away with lying. With the Epstein files, it's a pretty cut and dry case. They make a promise, they keep making the promise repeatedly, and then suddenly, randomly, right before Trump is set to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu as Netanyahu traveled to the United States, they're like, no, there's no client list, no client list. Okay, all right. Let me just give you one more. Rat Dog writes, "People you nominated for your own administration talked about Epstein for years. Now you're saying it never was without giving us the proof? And you don't want the support of your full base simply because they don't believe what you do?" Now, again, there are a few comments in there. I don't want to misrepresent. There are some people who are buying Trump's ridiculous narrative hook, line, and sinker. So this isn't a situation where you have MAGA appearing as some sort of monolith, right? There's some who are willing to play ball with Trump no matter what, but there is a sizable portion of his voters, of his supporters who are speaking out. Not just private citizens, okay, who voted for him, but also pretty big name public figures. So later this morning, Trump tripled down on insisting that no one should be talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's take a quick look at that.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago. I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had. The sad part is it's people that are really doing the Democrats' work. They're stupid people.
You mentioned past supporters when you were talking about the Epstein issue. Does that mean that you're effectively disowning any supporters who are now calling?
I lost a lot of faith in certain people, yeah. I lost, because they got duped by the Democrats. The Democrats are good for nothing.
You should always be skeptical of someone who takes a situation that's really a nonpartisan issue and tries to make it partisan. And that's what Trump is doing here. This is really a nonpartisan issue. There are people on the left who want to see the Epstein files. I'm one of them. Cenk is one of them. Obviously, we've been talking about the situation. And this is not some manufactured political stunt by the Democrats. This was one of the biggest lies. This is one of the biggest examples of Trump reneging on a promise. Now, some people have argued, well, Trump's not really on the record the way that Kash Patel or Pam Bondi is, pushing this idea that the Epstein files should be released. Okay, but he didn't ever say when he was running that he would block the release of the Epstein files. He played along with it. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. And Meanwhile, several right-wing media figures have suddenly stopped talking about Epstein. So there are those who are vocal in their dissent, but then there are those who are like, okay, Daddy Trump. Now, I'll tell you why. But first, Epstein's name was brought up only 8 times across Fox's programming on Monday, with its first reference coming well into the 6 p.m. hour. By contrast, Fox name-checked former President Joe Biden 158 times that same day. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So all of a sudden, we're not talking about Epstein. Epstein's irrelevant. We're not going to talk about him as much anymore. You know what's super relevant? Biden, the guy who's not in charge anymore. Now, why don't we check in with our favorite onion soup expert, Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters mentioned Epstein's name across more than 100 episodes of his programs over the last 6 years. Waters said he was leading the charge to expose Jeffrey Epstein's list of fixers, clients, and famous friends, unlike the corrupt mainstream press whose silence, he claimed, aided the powerful people who want to keep you from knowing about Epstein's world. What happened? What happened, Waters? Well, I'll tell our audience what happened. Well, on Monday night, the sole discussion of the Epstein story on his broadcast came during a segment in which his producer interviewed beachgoers. Fun. Now, keep in mind that over the weekend, CNN also reported the following, that the president called some of the attorney general's most vocal critics in an effort to stem the bleeding over the Epstein files. 3 sources familiar with the matter told CNN. Trump's calls included one with conservative activist Charlie Kirk on Sunday, or Saturday, I should say, to express his support for Bondi. And guess what happened? Kirk was a good boy. So Charlie Kirk said that he was, quote, done talking about Epstein for the time being. But I think he probably suffered a significant amount of backlash for that, because yesterday he claimed that when he said the time being, this is so funny. When he said the time being, what he actually meant was just that day specifically. So now he says he's going to continue discussing Epstein. Okay. So today, Kirk insisted that when Trump repeatedly calls his supporters stupid, he isn't actually referring to his supporters. So Kirk is still trying to do damage control for Trump, even though Trump did call his supporters all sorts of names. So let's see what kind of case Kirk is making here.
This is what I'm telling the president, both privately and publicly, is that the base cares about this, not to get you. As President Donald Trump is upset on Truth Social, I do not think he's attacking all of you in the rank and file. Instead, President Donald Trump is venting off some anger right now because he thinks that this is being used to derail his presidency.
You know, look, I know that Trump called you all sorts of names, MAGA, but he's just trying to vent, you know? He's just really frustrated that you're trying to hold him accountable for breaking a big promise. Okay, now Kirk also acknowledged, by the way, the massive outrage from his own fans on this very issue.
I can tell you right now, Gen Z is really fired up about this, especially young men. I mean, we're getting flooded with thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments that are very unhappy about this. We're basically having to do the PR work of the administration, basically. People are very, very confused. And some people are very disappointed and mad. You need to help them out a little bit. Explain what is going on. I am worried it's starting to seep in to lower propensity voters. And it's seeping into kind of the lower, not information, I hate that, but lower prop. So many people are chronically online. And I disagree. Some people say, oh, only chronically online people care about it. That's not correct.
You're not chronically online, Charlie Kirk. You're chronically online. Now, it's one thing to do a show for an online audience, but he's posting on social media all day. You're perpetually online. So you're going to look down your nose at other people who are criticizing the Trump administration for breaking their promise by saying that they're terminally online, whatever. Oh, okay, whatever. And by the way, I got news for you, Charlie, and I suspect you already knew this. You run a PR operation on behalf of the Trump administration. You think we're stupid? You're providing cover for him right now as we speak when he broke a promise, when his administration broke a major promise. Now, what are other conservatives saying about all this? Well, why don't we watch in order of appearance? This is a compilation featuring Dinesh D'Souza, Laura Ingraham, Greg Kelly, and Scott Jennings.
Going to make the case that even though there are unanswered questions about Epstein, it is in fact time to move on.
Now, as conservative influencers were eating their own about Epstein, the president was stealing the show on the 1-year anniversary of the day he almost lost his life. He made a triumphant appearance at a global sporting event.
You know, who's really upset right now are the podcasters. As I call it, the podcracy. I'm gonna just have to defer to President Trump on this thing. He actually knows Jeffrey Epstein or knew him. He appointed Pam Bondi. He knows all of the players. He knows these lawyers. I'm gonna take his word for it.
You know, if you vote for Donald Trump and you have trust in his judgment and the people he's appointed, at some point you have to trust their judgment. I mean, you put them in charge of this. And I think what Doug said is important to know. The Biden people had this stuff. If there was something incriminating about Trump, it would have come out. And also now the Trump people have this stuff. And if there was something incriminating about, Bill Gates or Bill Clinton, it would certainly have come out.
I love how Greg Kelly thinks saying that Trump personally knew Epstein is somehow a good argument for this cover up. And also, Scott Jennings, I wish he were here so I could ask him this question. I'm very curious if he would have the same light-handed treatment toward other government officials who decide to use their judgment in their decision making. We can go all the way back to 2020 when, the Democrats that are typically chided by Scott Jennings had decided to do, mask mandates, school shutdowns in response to COVID. I mean, why don't we just trust their judgment? At some point, you just got to trust their judgment. They're politicians after all. We all know politicians have good judgment. We should never question them. What kind of argument was that? What kind of argument was that? There are others who are continuing to speak out. Here's Megyn Kelly, Vinny Oshana, one of my favorites, I'll admit, and Rob Schmidt sharing their point of view.
You now have some MAGA influencers clearly on direction of the White House saying, okay, I'm done. Let's not pretend that some of the president's most loyal advocates aren't very, very interested in Epstein. They are, all right? However, some in the media let their loyalty to the president trump their journalistic obligation. And I refuse to be the CNN of Trump 2.0, where they just trusted the administration on Biden's mental acuity.
Let's just call it what it is. Something is obviously off. I don't know if the president's name is involved. Something is going on where everybody, we were promised everything. Bongino, everybody came in all riding iPad. The moment they came in, everything's changed. And now they're trying to tell us that we're crazy. And when somebody like Ben Shapiro of all people is telling me not to look into something and then go, it's a conspiracy. I don't listen to it. Okay, it's absolutely something is up.
You may have noticed the Epstein story was almost nowhere to be found, though, on Fox News these last couple of days. After months of very consistent coverage, it's pretty obvious that a lot of people don't really know what to do with this. There's a lot of people that are very scared because it's clear that the White House didn't want this to be a subject, but Trump's base, his supporters and base, care about it. And so there was a bit of a conflict there. And a lot of TV hosts are terrified of what to say and how to say it because they don't want to lose their audience and they don't want to piss off the White House at the same time.
And look, when it comes to these two feuding compilation videos that we've shown you, the second one where you have media figures essentially questioning the Trump administration seemed to be the most persuasive, or at least the most in line with the American people. Because despite how much the Trump administration is trying to spin this, they're bringing up the Steele dossier, oh, it's the Democrats. The American people aren't buying it, and that's according to a YouGov and Economist poll that just came out. They polled Americans between July 11th and 14th, and here's what they found. Respondents to the survey were asked, should the government release all the documents that it has about the Jeffrey Epstein case? And an almost unheard of 79% responded yes versus just 5% saying no, including a stunning 83% of Trump voters. Respondents were also asked if the government is covering up evidence about Epstein. And get a load of this, 67% of all Americans say yes, there's a cover up, with another full quarter not sure, meaning 92% of Americans are at least open to the idea that the government that Trump runs is covering up evidence on Epstein. That's not a good look. So it doesn't appear that Trump is willing to change course on this. If I were to bet money on it, we're never going to see any additional evidence, anything released pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein. And that's a damn shame, because I think the American people deserve to know what type of political leaders, what type of powerful individuals were implicated in the abuse of young girls, at the very least. And we should know whether or not these theories of a blackmail operation are true, because I need to know whether our government is being controlled by other governments. I want to know whether our foreign policy decisions are actually driven by what's best for the American people, or whether it's driven by what's best for another country. So we'll wait and see how this develops. But I'm really happy to see that people aren't dropping this, because I do think this is a serious issue. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about some bombings that have been taking place in Syria. What's behind it? Why is it happening? I'm going to give you the details and more when we come back.
You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in.
Hot dog is my favorite meat.
I think it's National Hot Dog Day, if I read the group text for the producers correctly. But yeah, if it is, congratulations, everybody. All right, in our members section, we have Doodle Dragon Imran, who says, hooray, Anna Hour. Love the theme music today, by the way, DJ Bart. Wednesday, you should expect house music, electronic music. Bart knows what I like. And I really appreciate that Bart cares to play the kind of music I like on Wednesdays. It gets me super amped. Funkin' for Fun says, donors got their tax cuts. They're ready to throw Trump's tariff-loving, economy-tanking ass under the bus. It's not a bad point. Although I do think when it comes to ordinary Trump voters who are, essentially engaging in the backlash, I think they were serious about wanting to see the Epstein files. Winter's Scoop says, the more Trump fights back, the more it convinces me that Trump is on video with a 14-year-old girl. There's something. I don't know if there's any evidence incriminating Trump. I don't know if Trump is doing this because he faced some sort of threat. I don't know. We don't know what happened behind the scenes. And I hate, first of all, living under a government that you can't trust. Having these questions about our own president, right? Who, by the way, has been accused by dozens of people, dozens of women of sexual assault. So we got to kind of put all of that in context. I don't know what's motivating Trump's decision to bury the Epstein files, but what matters is that he's doing it. And what also matters is that there's a bit of a revolt happening as a result. Rebel Dragon says he's mad that his own base is buying into the truth for a change. Yeah, he's mad that he can't manipulate them on this issue. And I love to see that. I love to see people stand up for what they feel is right and to push back against an administration that they voted into office. That's what democracy actually is. When the people rise up and they fight back against politicians who they believe are engaging in wrongdoing, that's when you know you live in a democracy. When you engage in partisan hackery and you provide cover for an administration simply because they're on one team or the other, I just think it's so deeply pathetic. You're never going to have a better political system if you have a docile electorate that just provides cover for their side no matter what. We need to move away from that. Knuckle Dragon says Trump is turning himself into a pretzel, trying to weasel his way out of his Epstein connection. He's gonna snap. I mean, he's kind of snapping as we speak. All right, thank you to Cindy Liu, who resubscribed with Amazon Prime on Twitch for 39 months. I'm happy to be back. She says that she's happy to see me back. And welcome to our new member, J.I. Welcome to TYT Premium. Let me see if I can maybe fit in one super chat. Let's see. Stinky Feet says he's on the list. I don't blame anyone for thinking that. Anyway, back to the show.
Hot dog is my favorite meat.
Smash it.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. You're watching TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. And special thanks to R. Stone with a generous super chat. Just want to read his comment or their comment before we move on to our next story. With all the actions the right wing have done this week, leads me to believe they have an electoral scheme starting with his ICE crew to be deployed anywhere at a moment's notice. Prepare for a ramp up of election fraud rhetoric for 2026. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm curious to see what Trump is going to do in the face of backlash from his own base. And look, there are things that he's done that are deeply unpopular. And that also includes that massive omnibus bill that cuts Medicare funding while, increasing the tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the wealthy. He included, as I said, because I want to be fair, some tax cuts that benefit working class people, no tax on tips to a certain amount, no tax on overtime to a certain amount. Both things are going to be means tested, of course, and they're going to expire, meaning that 4 years later, those tax cuts go away. But what remains permanent are the tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the wealthy. And a lot of Trump voters rely on our social safety net. Okay. And I don't like anyone insulting them for voting for Trump and also relying on the social safety net. Some people are busy. They don't connect the dots, whatever. There are fellow Americans. My point is, though, when they lose those benefits, when they see that they're barely getting by and they're not getting the same access to Medicaid, they're going to be upset. So we'll see what happens. But I think you make an interesting point, R. Stone. All right. With that said, let's move on to our next story.
The Syrian capital is being hit, and state TV says Israel is responsible.
إسرائيل كاتس إن الجيش سيواصل مهاجمة قوات.
Damascus, the capital of Syria, of course, has been hit by a series of Israeli airstrikes. Because if Israel isn't bombing their neighbors, what else would they be up to? Now, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, shared video of his country's attack and accompanied that video with a statement saying that the painful blows have begun. Okay. Now, Israel, of course, has taken responsibility for bombing the headquarters of the Syrian armed forces in Damascus. And there have been additional Israeli strikes in other parts of the country, other Israeli strikes in Damascus as well. Specifically, they've targeted the defense ministry in Syria and the presidential palace. And in other parts of Syria, including the southern city of I can't say it, I'm sorry, but basically the southern region of Syria where they have a majority Druze community. And so you're gonna want to know that because it's basically, in my opinion, the cover story for what's going on in Syria right now. But there's this claim that Israel's just trying to protect the Druze community in Syria. They're very concerned about them. Okay. They're also claiming that their latest military campaign is about protecting them. Tel Aviv is demanding the demilitarization of Syria, a sovereign country, especially under its new leadership. And there's going to be more on that in just a minute. But before I share more details, why don't we watch this?
The flashpoint of Sueda, which is a stronghold for this Druze community. They are a minority group, but they are a majority in this city. And that is where these clashes broke out over the weekend between Bedouin tribes and this Druze community. With that outbreak of violence over the weekend, dozens of people were killed. That's what prompted the Syrian government to send forces to southern Syria. It says, the Syrian government says, in an attempt to quell the unrest, to calm what you're hearing and you're seeing there on your screen. But Israel's response, Israel's intervention in what is a domestic affair has, of course, poured fuel on this fire. And it makes it ever more difficult for government forces to reestablish control in an area when Israeli forces say they have no right to be there. Israel has declared a unilateral demilitarized zone in this part of Syria, something the Syrian government says it does not agree to. It is calling on Israel to stop. It is accusing Israel of violating its sovereignty.
So there you have it. That's the town I'm referring to, Sueda, which is where they have a large Druze community in southern Syria. And the Syrian Druze community, as you got a little sense of from that video, does not recognize the new Syrian regime. Now, remember, Bashar al-Assad, his regime was toppled. The person in charge who has taken power is a former al-Qaeda guy, not a good look, but nonetheless, Ahmed al-Sharaa, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. The Druze community is concerned about him because under Bashar al-Assad, while he was a brutal dictator, there's no question about it, it was more a secular society. But now there's concern that there's going to be, Islamic extremism in Syria that will not respect various religious minorities or ethnic minorities in Syria. And you should know that Syria is far more diverse than most Americans realize. And so the Druze community that does not want to see the military in their town under the leadership of Syria's new leader is understandable to some extent. But unfortunately, this is what happens when you have regime change wars. When you have a proxy war take place in Syria to topple a regime, well, what comes next? People who tend to love war, neoconservatives especially, seem to push this idea that when you topple a regime, all these wonderful things will happen. Flowers will bloom, democracy will bloom. But that's not what typically happens, as we've learned in Libya, as we're learning now in Syria. But unfortunately for the Druze, the person in charge right now is, al-Sharaa, and they don't want the military in their town. The Bedouins are upset about that. So the two groups have kind of been attacking one another in Sueda. Now, Israel has used those hostilities as an excuse to bomb the hell out of Syria. Not just Sueda, but as I've mentioned in the beginning of the story, Damascus, the capital as well. And they're specifically going after government buildings, military infrastructure, things like that. So again, the defense ministry, the presidential palace was bombed. And you also have the headquarters of the Syrian armed forces in Damascus getting bombed by the Israelis as well. Now, with that in mind, Israel also has a community of Israeli Druze. Okay, we've talked about them on the show before, and some of them are concerned about how the Druze in Syria, their brothers and sisters, as they refer to them, are being treated. And they're so concerned about it that they're trying to take matters into their own hands. And in this next video, you'll see what I'm talking about.
We are watching here on the Israeli side of the border is really quite stunning, Becky, and that is that we are seeing Druze individuals in Israel, either Israeli Druze or Syrian Druze who live in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, attempting to cross into Syria to try and help their fellow Druze brothers in Syria who have been under attack in the city of Sueda. And we are seeing hundreds of these Druze individuals crossing the Israeli border fence into the Israeli-controlled buffer zone inside of Syria, trying to make their way to presumably that city of Sueda.
So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed this matter and requested that the Israeli Druze stop attempting to cross the border into Syria to essentially engage in these scuffles and these hostilities. He says that the IDF has it covered through their bombing campaign, and footage proves that because the IDF is bombing Sueda along with other government targets in Syria. But it's also important to understand that not everyone in the Druze community wants Israel to be involved in this. And I suspect that they feel that protecting the Druze is not really what's motivating the Israeli government. And I'm going to give you more evidence of that in just a minute. But first, take a look at this.
Well, the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar kind of laid it out this morning, saying that there are two primary reasons for Israel intervening in Syria. The first of which, he said, is that Israel is trying to protect itself, that it does not want to allow certain armed elements along its border in that southern part of Syria. So there is a national security interest, they say. The second element, though, which seems to be the most salient one at this moment, is that they say that they have an interest in protecting the minority Druze community in Syria, citing strong bonds that Israel has with the Druze community. And what's important to also understand is that the Druze community is not a monolith. First of all, the Druze are a religion. They live in Syria, they live in Israel, they live in Lebanon as well. And there are very much differences, not only between the Syrian Druze and the Israeli Druze, the Lebanese Druze, but also within the Syrian Druze community itself.
And by the way, I should note that the former Al-Qaeda new leader of Syria has made overtures toward Israel in an effort to create some sort of allyship, to maybe even do business with one another, to be friendly with one another, right? So you have the new leadership of Syria wanting to play ball with Israel. And honestly, the new regime in Syria doesn't really have the power to push back on or go to war with Israel. But it didn't really help in regard to convincing Israel that maybe you should stop trying to take over more or occupy more land in Syria or engage in these airstrikes, which they're currently engaging in. Now, there's the Israeli cover story, and I'm going to call it that, right? And then, I just don't buy their concern for Druze. I don't. And even if they are, okay, well, who are you to invade or bomb a sovereign country under this premise that you're trying to protect any group of people? I mean, you have a brand new regime. Israel has wanted regime change in Syria. Congratulations, you got what you want. So why not allow the new regime to govern, to find a way to unite the Syrian people regardless of what their background is, what their religion is, what their ethnicity is. Now, I don't have a lot of faith in al-Shara. Ever since he's taken power, there have been attacks on Druze. There have also been attacks on Christians living in Syria. It's been a nightmare, which often is the case when you have a regime change without a real plan in place to, essentially do something after a regime is toppled. But this conflict, I don't want anyone to think just started today or earlier this week. No. Okay. This dates back all the way to the 1967 war between Israel and Syria and the agreement both countries signed in 1974, in which Israel would keep its part of the Golan Heights and there would be a buffer zone between Syria and Israel. But Israel has taken advantage of the fall of Bashar al-Assad, which is why I think they were part of that proxy war to topple Bashar al-Assad. Take a look.
Ever since the fall of the Assad government, the Israelis have seen the opportunity not just to destroy all of Syria's military capabilities, whether it was the Navy, the Army, heavy weaponry, and air defense systems, everything that you could imagine would possibly pose a threat to Israel, it has eliminated. And then on top of that, Israeli soldiers have come deeper into Syrian territory. I'll tell you, last week we were actually in Quneitra in western Syria, in southwestern Syria, and we were talking to people there. there. There was one person, a local, who was with us in the car trying to point out where the Israeli soldiers were. We saw tanks in February there. Now those tanks have been replaced by drones. And there was a drone that came all the way to the windshield of our car. And that person hit their face because he said that all of that area, there's facial recognition software that Israelis are using on Syrian territory. And there was a raid on some people by Israeli soldiers because there were people from outside of Quneitra who came to visit them.
Yeah, fascinating. I think the AI technology being deployed, the use of drones, Israeli drones in Syria, it's the type of context that you're not going to get in American reporting. I'm just keeping it real. I had to do a lot of digging to kind of figure out what was really going on here. But I want to go to video 5 because Israeli ministers aren't calling for the protection of the minority Druze community. They're calling for something else in Syria right now, which blows my mind. Take a look.
Now, we're also hearing from an Israeli minister, this is from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's own party, who is calling for Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Shara, to be, quote, eliminated. So I'm wondering, what are Israel's goals here? Why did Israel attack this region?
Well, Israel has been attacking this region and especially all of the western parts of Syria, occupying more territory, putting its soldiers on the ground, harassing citizens, carrying out raids, abducting Syrian citizens, not giving any justifications or clarifications of why it's doing it. In last week, we've heard from the Israeli army raiding what it called an Iranian cell. And when we went to that area, a child was among the people who was abducted.
They abducted a child? Was the child the Iranian cell that they were worried? Come on, guys. Come on. I mean, it's infuriating. It really is infuriating when you have a country run by a government that makes Israelis out to be perpetual victims when they can't stop bombing their neighbors and occupying land. And I mean, you have a minister in the Likud party calling for regime change in Syria again. How much more do we need to destabilize the Middle East? It's absurd. Jeez, okay, but there are a few more points worth mentioning because there's a water basin called the Yarmouk River that actually provides a shared water supply between Syria and Jordan. And it appears that Israel has some interest in occupying that water supply. Now, why would they want that? Well, the Israeli control over the Yarmouk River and Unity Dam is a strategic move aimed at enhancing its influence in the region, especially after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. This control grants Israel the ability to regulate one of the most important water sources in Syria, allowing it to directly impact water resources in both Syria and Jordan. I mean, look, this kind of sounds a little far-fetched, doesn't it? I mean, when has Israel ever controlled the water supply of, oh wait, they do that all the time as it pertains to Palestinians. Whether we're talking about Gaza, whether we're talking about an occupation in the West Bank, these are the kinds of tactics that you'll see from the Israeli government and the IDF. Israeli control included the towns of Al-Bath, Khan Arnabe, and Katana, in addition to the Syrian side of Mount Hermon, providing Israel with a strategic position overlooking Damascus. And I should note that Israel probably wants access to this incredibly important resource as well because they have water insecurity issues as well. So, final thing that I'll mention, because you should never just believe a cover story. Okay, you should never just believe what a government is telling you about what's motivating their bombing campaign. You need to dig deeper. And the Times of Israel reported today, Netanyahu's corruption trial adjourned amid strikes on Syria. Anyone surprised by that? Because I'm not. All right, we got to take our break. When we come back, one more story before we go to Cenk. All right, DJ Payne writes in and says, Chuck the Cuck has zero credibility. We all know better that he and these other supporters were put in line by their daddy. What a joke. That was a reference to the first story I covered about the Epstein files. In Liberty and Guns We Trust says Trump doesn't want the Epstein files out because he's a child molester and he's in the files and doesn't want his rape of kids out. This is obviously not something that's proven. It's a speculation. I want to be clear about that. I don't want to be sued for defamation. Kirk's defending that evil. These are the same people in bed with Netanyahu. It's demonic. So let me just say, you don't even have to accuse Trump or make a declarative statement that Trump is in the Epstein files to point out how disgusting and immoral it is to withhold this information from the American people. Because at the end of the day, Epstein wasn't engaging in this disgusting behavior alone. There were other people who were engaging in the same behavior, and they live among us and they never faced any consequences for it. That is deeply, deeply immoral. It's disgusting. So I agree with you entirely about how evil it is to cover this up. Not that Donald says, who said don't believe anything until it's officially denied? They were right. Good point. All right, let's go back to our members section where Stephen Matthias, who's been a member for 56 months, thank you, says, anyone want to take odds on them spending yet another entire episode on Epstein? Well, I just spent, 20 minutes on Syria? So I guess you were wrong. Cannibal that ate Uncle Biden says, I can't wait to hear Jenks Alex Jones impression, cracks me up. Well, you're gonna have to wait for the second hour and that's coming very soon. Afro Vegan says, so what Charlie Kirk is saying is Trump is not emotionally mature. And that's why he's taking it out on his donors. He's not taking it out on his donors though. He's taking it out on regular Trump voters who are engaging in the backlash. And look, if Trump actually pushed back on his donors, you deserve props for that, right? And he has in some cases. That's not what's happening here. This is not a thing about the donor. If anything, I would venture to say his donors probably want to keep the Epstein file secret. TK Buffalo says, I hate to repeat it, but things like JFK, COVID, and Epstein, these are too big to just simply go away for all Americans on both sides wanting some truth. I totally agree with you, TK Buffalo. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's the reason why making this situation out to be some partisan issue is ridiculous to me. Michael Catalano, who's been a member for 6 months, says, R. Stone is 100% right. Congress just funded ICE to the size of a private army. And one of Trump's classics is lying and claiming illegal immigrants vote. I mean, she's definitely on the record doing that. So it's a good point. All right. Live 18 White Girl says, oh, Anna, it's my birthday. Can I get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. Happy birthday. I hope you get treated like a queen today. Okay. Get everything you want. I hope you're being spoiled. And thank you for spending your birthday with us. I really appreciate you watching. All right. Let's get back to the show. Velvet Goldmine in our Twitch community was commenting on or responding to one of the Trump videos we showed you in the first story about covering up the Epstein files. Velvet Goldmine says, saying it doesn't make it true. The economy doesn't feel any better for people now than it did when Biden was president, but he keeps lying and saying it's the best ever. It seems like some of them may be waking up. Well, you make an excellent point. And in fact, the next story is kind of about the economy and what the international community is trying to do in dethroning the US dollar, which, if they succeed, would be absolutely disastrous for the American people. I'm going to explain how right now. Let's get into it.
And if we lost the world standard dollar, that would be like losing a war, a major world war. We would not be the same country any longer. We're not going to let that happen. The dollar, you ever hear the expression, dollar is king? The dollar is king. We're going to keep it that way.
Well, Trump certainly would want to keep the dollar king, and all Americans would want that as well, because if the US dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, we're in a lot of trouble. That could lead to significant inflation, higher interest rates, and a lot of economic turmoil for the American people. And it seems like Trump understands that. However, while the US dollar does remain dominant as the world's reserve currency, there might be some trouble in paradise as these so-called BRICS nations are essentially working together to dethrone the US dollar. Now, Trump, again, plans to retaliate, and I'll show you how in just a minute. But let's actually start with what BRICS is, okay, and what these nations expressed, their expressed commitment, okay, during their annual summit, which just took place earlier this month. Now, BRICS comprises of 10 countries, and that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Indonesia, the UAE, and Iran. And they are focusing on two different things. I'm gonna start with the alternatives to what's known as the SWIFT system. So during their annual summit, BRICS leaders have basically issued this 31-page statement reaffirming their commitment to undermine the US dollar. Now, while they don't plan to create some new currency to do so, they are creating an alternative to something called SWIFT. Now, if you're unfamiliar with SWIFT, that means you're a normal person. Most people are not familiar with it. However, SWIFT is the international payment / banking system that is dominated by the United States and Europe. Now, the alternative is BRICS Pay for BRICS nations or nations doing trade with BRICS, or M-Bridge, which is, which includes non-BRICS countries. So they're trying to find a different way of doing international payments and banking without having to rely on SWIFT, which again is controlled and mostly dominated by the West, the United States and Europe. Also, a key goal is to enable payments in local currencies, which would reduce the need for conversion to US dollars when these trade deals are happening between countries that are interested in kind of moving away from the BRICS system. And this can really lower transaction costs for them, but obviously be detrimental for the West. Now, 50 countries have reportedly expressed interest in joining this BRICS Pay initiative. And that does have some American politicians concerned, including President Donald Trump. Now, if you're wondering, what is the motivation behind this? Well, developing nations would have a massive, giant interest in setting up these alternative international banking systems because BRICS countries, particularly Russia, have faced sanctions that have impacted their ability to even use SWIFT for international payments. So they're looking for a workaround here. Okay, so for many emerging economies, gold serves as a form of geopolitical insurance. Treasury holdings and access to SWIFT can be frozen at any time. It's more challenging to do the same with physical gold stored in a domestic vault. And that is the second part of what BRICS nations are doing. They're trying to move away from investing in, the US dollar, and instead they're parking their savings in gold. That's what they're investing in. And if you take a look at this headline, you have a financial institution like UBS calling the US dollar unattractive as gold becomes a preferred reserve asset. So the international community, again, has basically decided to invest in gold in lieu of US currency. Let's take a look at this graph, and what it'll show you is, it's a representation of how the US dollar is at a 3-year low, while the value of gold has really shot up. The green line represents the US dollar. The yellow line represents gold. Institutions now hold nearly as much gold as they did back in 1965, which was, during the Bretton Woods era. And according to the World Gold Council's survey of other nations, of course, a whopping 95% of central banks expect to increase their gold reserves over the next 12 months. So the US dollar index, according to Forbes, when measured against a basket of other major currencies, has actually declined 10% this year through mid-June. So we're talking about the entirety of Trump's second term. We've seen a decline in the value of the US dollar. But Trump, of course, is typically unable to look inward. He is unable to take ownership of mistakes that he may have made. Some of the decisions he may have made that led to the decline of the US dollar. And David Morrison of Trade Nation, he's a senior analyst with Trade Nation, says that Trump's tariffs, the fact that many investors view his administration as somewhat chaotic, along with concerns over US national debt, have seen the dollar fall out of favor. And what did Trump literally just do? Well, he pushed for the passage of this major omnibus bill that adds another $3.4 trillion to our debt, our current debt of $37 trillion. So that's all to say that the international community is kind of looking at the United States and they're like, I don't know, man. Do we really want to have this much faith, this much trust in the US dollar? But apparently Trump operates at one speed and one speed only, because here's how he responded to BRICS nations essentially working together to move away from the US dollar. Take a look.
A couple days ago, you issued a new tariff threat to members of the BRICS countries for if they aligned with anti-American policies.
10% charge.
That would be India, Brazil, Russia,
They have to pay 10% if they're in BRICS. Because BRICS was set up to hurt us. BRICS was set up to degenerate our dollar and take our dollar as the standard, take it off as the standard. And that's okay if they want to play that game, but I can play that game too. So anybody that's in BRICS is getting a 10% charge.
Is that immediate, sir? Or
Yeah,
is that
pretty soon.
if they engage in some behavior?
Well, if they're a member of BRICS, they're going to have to pay 10% tariff just for that one thing. And they won't be a member long. I thought BRICS was, I said this about a year ago, and it largely broke up. But, there are a couple that hang around, but I thought it largely broke up. BRICS is not, in my opinion, not a serious threat. But what they're trying to do is destroy the dollar.
Well, they are trying to destroy the dollar. Whether or not they're going to be successful in doing so remains to be seen. But again, there is increased interest in the international community to move away from SWIFT, to invest in gold as opposed to the US dollar. And let's also remember, since Trump is thinking about retaliating against BRICS nations through additional tariffs, international investors have also been concerned about rising debt levels. Trump's tax cutting big beautiful bill could add another $3.3 trillion to the US debt over the next 10 years. And as I mentioned earlier, the tariffs and the uncertainty pertaining to Trump's tariffs policy, his trade wars and all that has led to an increase of central banks around the world wanting to no longer invest in US currency and instead invest in gold. So he's essentially compounding the situation by moving forward with the same policies that have partly created this mess in the first place. So we'll see what happens, but it's important to understand what's happening in the international community, how America is perceived in the international community. You're not really going to get a good description of that if you're just consuming American media. But when you have all these countries trying to find ways to work around the United States, to no longer really invest in the United States, when there's this distrust in the international community, you got to ask why. And our leaders should be held accountable for that, right? If they're engaging in policies that could eventually lead to the dethroning of the US dollar, we as Americans would be in a lot of trouble. We got to keep it real on that. So with that in mind, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, Cenk Uygur will join me. Actually, I got to read one comment because I really appreciate it. Corden Big writes in and says, just got home, doing a dab in your name, Anna. I appreciate you. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. Not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of, making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd. But it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no. He's taking apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team. David Soror.
Dr. Phil.
Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Chang.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated? Or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like, how is that like at one level, it's like, good, what we're talking about it now. You're like, it's 2024. And that's always been the critique, your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
Yes. Congratulations on all your success. You guys are everywhere. It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both work to achieve. And I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about
This
that.
is a happy Anna Kasparian.
What's up?
You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
I believe virtually everything I read. That is what makes me more of a selective human than someone who doesn't believe anything.
TYT, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. Good to join you in mid-shows we do on Wednesdays. Fun for everybody. Can't wait to get to the stories. Casper, what do you have for us?
I have a lot. First of all, I want to read a comment really quickly about what's happening to the Druze community in southern Syria. Wishing Wells writes in and says, pronounced Sweda, that's the area of Syria that they mostly live in. I visited there in 2009 for my best friend's wedding. The Druze are known for keeping to themselves, but I've never met a more welcoming community. They have a good reason to not trust any of these powers. No one in this situation has their best interest. I totally agree with you on that. If only they could be left alone in peace. Agree with you on that as well. And then next TYT reporter says that community knows once Israel gets a demilitarized zone, they will use it to start taking land. Netanyahu is so obvious. He is so obvious. You're right about that. Okay.
Can I just, I want to add one quick thing to that, Anna, which is, look, if I thought Israel was genuinely trying to protect the Druze community, I say, oh, great, that's lovely. They're never genuine. They always attack. They always take land. So if the Druze think, oh, look, the Israelis are here to help us, man, you have got a very rude awakening ahead for you. That is never the case.
All right, well, we're going to talk about Alex Jones with some pretty surprising comments today in response to Donald Trump. So take it away.
This is the most self-destructive temper tantrum stuff, and is the equivalent of going off the coast of San Diego and just for a day throwing rotten chicken blood into the ocean. Great white sharks will show up, probably in a few hours.
Today, Alex Jones stated that President Donald Trump is engaging in a self-destructive temper tantrum over the backlash toward the administration for refusing to release the Epstein files. And he had a lot more criticism of Trump where that came from. Jake, I'm gonna just immediately toss to you because enjoy your victory lap. Go ahead.
Yeah, no guys, look, this is really important. It isn't about we were right and literally every other, not literally, and not every, but most other left-wing hosts that told you they'll never turn, they'll all agree 100% with Trump on everything, they're a cult, etc. Or yeah, they were wrong. They could move the goalposts. Oh, they're not saying slay queen to Kamala Harris, so it doesn't count. Okay, whatever. You could do whatever you want. You could. That's not. But that for you guys out there that aren't in this silly media games and stuff, we need to win over independent voters. We're not going to win over Alex Jones. You crazy? Okay, but the fact that Alex Jones is saying no, Trump is wrong, and I'm mad at him, etc. And we're not a cult. It gets people thinking independently. Once you get, and Alex Jones fans are the least likely to be converted, right? But especially for the independents that are the closest to us, that voted for Obama before, that voted for Bernie before. If you get them looking at each issue and going, yeah, you're right, I actually agree with you on that, or I don't agree on that. And then at the end of the day, they're gonna see, wait, you guys, the left is the populist left, not the establishment Democrats, not the corporate guys, but like, yeah, we do agree with you on anti-war and anti-corruption. Oh, you guys have been saying it all along. We do agree with you on paid family leave and higher wages and lower drug prices. So focus on what's important. But yes, this break within the Trump ecosystem is massively important because it gets people thinking, and you want them thinking and you want them looking around so that they could find the populist left. And if they don't like it, no problem. But okay, but at least we've got to get that option in front of them, and this helps tremendously.
Now, Alex Jones is hitting Trump. Look, it's super noticeable because, as we all know, Jones has been very reluctant to criticize Trump publicly. There have been some previous examples, but certainly nothing as overt and aggressive as what we're seeing today. Now, in previous days, he has theorized that Trump is not releasing the Epstein files in order to save the stock market, while also accusing the Democrats of fabricating the contents of the Epstein files. So look, we still have a lot of issues with Alex Jones here, but let's take a look at more of what he had to say.
Trump believes, and it's probably true, that if it comes out a bunch of head bankers and politicians and leaders and business leaders are in this, which we know they were, that will crash the stock market. That will just destroy America's image in the world. And so it's so horrible that they made the decision not to bring it out. After years of saying they would release the Epstein file or list, suddenly they're not going to, and we're told it doesn't exist. But then Trump comes out last night and says, well, it does exist, but the Democrats had control of it, manipulated it, which is actually true. They've had control, but they would destroy anything they didn't want in there and leave what they wanted in there. I didn't even think about the fact. I'm like, oh yeah, if they've had the list and they've had the files for years, the Democrats would take stuff out, destroy it. Well, that's obvious. They would leave in and twist and put in what they wanted.
Okay, not a total nonsense. And by the way, oh, it would hurt the reputation of America in the international community if it was outed that a bunch of our bankers are disgusting pedophiles that our government has been providing cover for. First of all, I've got news for everyone in America, okay? The international community does not perceive us in a positive way at all, at all. We are aiding and abetting a genocide right now as we speak, okay? Even if the Security Council in the United Nations overwhelmingly votes in favor of sanctioning Israel or doing something to stop the genocide in Gaza, the US comes in and boom, vetoes it right away. We are not perceived in a positive light in the international community as it is. And I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn about, oh, let's protect the rapists and the disgusting pedophiles because we're worried about the stock market. The stock market will be all right? It always rebounds. But we need to find out who among us, who in positions of power are disgusting predators that shouldn't be in those positions of power. They should be in a prison cell.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake.
And two things about that. I mean, look at who the real populists are, right? So here we are saying, no quarter given to Epstein clients, okay? Whereas Alex Jones, that by the way, that was a day or two ago, saying, well, maybe Trump is right to give them comfort and aid and hide them. So not so populist after all, right? So now on this show, I don't know that anybody's ever criticized Alex Jones more than we have on this show, right? And what he did at Sandy Hook is unconscionable and unforgivable among so many other conspiracy theories that were total junk. But this is not a conspiracy theory. 80% of Americans agree on this. The real conspiracy is that the government is right, that the girls raped themselves and there were no clients, right? So, but the second important thing is, you saw Alex Jones there a day or two ago scrambling to find an excuse for Trump. But as you'll see today, he's saying, nope, I gave him a layup on that and he still wouldn't take it. So now the break is even worse than it was before.
So apparently some of the comments that Trump has been making recently in regard to his own base have basically been the final straw for Alex Jones. Now, he says that it was the last straw, and let's watch Alex Jones accuse Trump of treating his supporters like a cult.
Your statements about, you people that bring this up don't even deserve to be involved in this movement. You are excommunicata. You are henceforth ex cathedra from the mouth of the God King. You are expelled from the church of the holy golden toad, Donald John Trump. Well, I was never in the church of the holy golden toad. I was never in a cult. I never said MAGA was a cult. I said a lot of people want it to be a cult. If you start saying I'll excommunicate people, well, you're not allowed, unless it's a cult, to say to people, you either agree with everything I do and don't question things, or you're not in our club. I don't want you. Well, that kind of sounds like a thoroughbred cult to me.
Yeah, and look, to be quite frank, it was a cult in Trump's first term. But Trump managed to cobble together a pretty fragile coalition in his second term. And those people aren't buying his BS, and they're not going to be bullied into dropping something that they obviously care deeply about. And by the way, one more video before I go to you, Cenk, because Jones also admitted that members of Trump's orbit are actively trying to make him drop the story.
I don't want power. I don't want to be in tuxedos at Mar-a-Lago. I don't want to be at the White House. I've already been invited. I had the White House calling me this morning. That's a whole nother thing. Bunch of big heavy hitters calling. And, it's like, what do you want, Alex? How can we make you happy? And I'm like, can Trump please stop destroying himself and us with him? Well, yeah, he does what he thinks is best. Streisand effect, yeah, we know. Yeah, don't you? I'm right.
Damn. So there's Alex Jones publicly admitting that members of Trump's administration are hitting him up and basically trying to trade favors so Alex Jones drops the story. And I guess to his credit, I mean, clearly he's not dropping it. So Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's because his own audience is livid. Because if he dropped the story, then he'd be right next to Trump in the sellout line, right? So, so the vote, remember what we always said, blame the politicians, you wanna blame media figures, that makes a lot of sense. And you want to, so that's why when sometimes people beat up on us, that's okay. We're in the game, right? But don't beat up on the voters, because those same voters are now even pushing Alex Jones to, you better not support Trump on this issue, right? And that's huge. I watched the whole thing, and that whole excuse that Alex Jones had set up earlier with, oh yeah, why don't you just say the Democrats destroyed the files, right? Which is, by the way, he's not wrong about. He's wrong that that's what happened. He's obviously making it up ex post facto, right? But he's not wrong that that would have been the right excuse, the right lie, right? But so Alex Jones serves it up on a silver platter to Trump, and Trump's like, no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say that they're non-existent and fake, and anyone who asked for it, like all of my voters, are terrible people and stupid and disloyal, right? Okay, poll out today, Anna. 79% of all Americans say release the Epstein files. 83% of Republicans, larger than the national average, say release the Epstein files. Is Donald Trump involved in a cover-up? An astounding 59% of his own voters say yes. Wow. I mean, come on, guys. If you thought they were never gonna break with him, can I get a tiny bit of honesty without moving goalposts? So,
in fact, let me add to that, Cenk, because our member Sutton writes in and says the conservative subreddit is livid over this. There is no daylight between the American people on this issue, which is why I keep repeatedly making the point that the Epstein files really isn't a partisan issue. Anyone who's trying to make it a partisan issue is a hack. The American people, meaning ordinary people, in my opinion, I know that there's gonna be disagreement, but I don't care. I think most people are good people, they're kind people. And when they see an injustice, like with what happened in this whole Epstein debacle, they want answers. And I think this is a perfect example of how most Americans are in line when it comes to justice, fairness, rule of law. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think that people are gonna drop this in Trump's face.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why Alex Jones today, I mean, if you watch the whole thing, he goes off and says, you're not the Pope, bro. Okay, so there's obvious massive, it's like going over from rebellion to almost revolution against Trump within his own base here. But you made a great point, Anna. In order to win the popular vote, Trump needed a larger coalition, a larger tent. And when you have a larger tent, it's more likely to break apart because the guys on the one end, like I saw somebody on social media today, is like, I voted for Trump, but before that I voted for Obama. He's like, I'm open, I just voted for Trump because he was less establishment. This proves he is the establishment, he's the elites. So who's next? That's what you want. You want to bring that guy back. The coalition is so large in order to win the popular vote that those independent voters are not at all like the radical right going, oh yeah, I'll get her, Alcatraz and all that stuff. Don't lump them in together. It's both factually incorrect and strategically incorrect. Now, I mean, look at what Alex Jones said there. Trump was the Pope of the Church of the Holy Golden Toad. I don't even know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. Okay, so I hear the toads are gay because of the water or something. So I mean that can't be good. So now finally, so the people who thought that all of MAGA was a cult, and if you're among the voters that thought that on the left and you're on the Democrats, I don't blame you guys. The reason I don't blame you is because they were. In the first term, whatever Trump said, they would just blindly follow. And we were all ripping our hair out. And I'm like, can I get a little bit of daylight, etc. But this is what I've been trying to get through to people. Because back then, it was just Fox News and Rush Limbaugh. It was an assembly line of talking points. and they didn't get any diversity. Now they got diversity all over the place. Larger tent. It includes Rogan. It includes Theo Von. It includes guys like Andrew Schultz who are lifelong Democrats. So when you have a tent that large and filled with independent media, even though they might lean right and really frustrate us on issues, Trump's not their uncle. It's not Fox News. It's a different media. It's a different voting base. We have to open our eyes to that so that we can react in a way that makes sense instead of driving them away by categorizing them as all of them as the most radical right and yelling at them and accusing them or making fun of them. Ha, you guys were wrong with Trump. Why don't you invite them in, at least the ones that agree with us, not the ones that don't agree with us, and go, hey, you know what? You wanted populism. Good news, we've got populism. And it's real, it's not fake. I mean, if an ally of mine is in the White House and they don't release the Epstein files immediately, I will be livid and turn on them instantly, okay? There's no, and if they don't do all the things that we ask for, anti-war, anti-corruption, etc., no quarter given. Real populism, real honesty. That's what the American voters want. You give that to them and you're gonna win a comfortable majority.
Yep. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what defense contractors are up to in lobbying to get massive government contracts to build the so-called Golden Dome. And well, a genocide scholar says that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. We'll tell you who he is and why it's relevant when we come back.
We're not going to have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me. Tears my guts up.
Hey guys, so I'm gonna read some of these blind because it just came in, but let's go to our members on TYT.com. SM says, I said it before and I'll say it again, the people that put him in power will remove him from it. I highly doubt his base will forgive him for this, especially for playing with our collective intelligence. Yeah, I think that insulting his own base, I mean, you could not do anything dumber. And how do I know that? Because I'm a Democrat. That's what Democratic leaders have been doing my entire life. And that's why they got clowned and they're at 19%, right? Oh, our base wants paid family leave because the whole country wants it. No, you dumbasses, we're never gonna give it to you, okay? Here's a couple of crumbs. I negotiated drug price on one drug. Oh, I'm a hero, I'm a hero. So I know all about it, man. I know all about those goddamn lies. So we gotta get past all these liars and find the right people. By the way, I mean, I keep saying because it's true. What did Ro Khanna do? He found an ally in Tom Massey. Now they're introducing it to release the Epstein files. Saw a report today, they might win. They might pull enough Republican votes away to vote with the Democrats to release the Epstein files. That's how you work with the other side. That's how you say, look, I'm gonna be honest. It said, guys, there's a way to win. And at this point, Ro Khanna is doing it in like an unbelievably genius way. Again, on social media today, a bunch of independents going, you know what? The one guy I would vote for on the Democratic side is Ro Khanna. There you go. There you go. That's how you win people over, by being honest and showing them what you really think and that you're actually gonna deliver for them. Old Woodsman 53 says, when Cenk brought up the Mossad connection on Leland Vidder's News Nation show last night, both Vidderd and the other panelist, Batya Angur Sargon, broke out in laughter. Yeah, who's laughing now? Yeah, okay. God help them if a candidate we support wins, because we're gonna find out what Israel's been up to. And then we'll see who's laughing and who's not laughing, okay? So, but that's why if a populist left guy goes in, the establishment, what they did to Trump is gonna be nothing compared to what they do to us. Because at the end of the day, who was Trump? He was a dog and he healed, right? We bring in someone that won't heal, the establishment will be like, no! Because the beloved Israel will be at risk. Beloved corporate donors will be at risk. That's how you'll know we're on the right track, when they react with rage. Sutton says the conservative subreddit is livid over. So you read that one. Dirge said, I'm pretty sure I'm going to win my bet against Cenk that Trump will still be waving tariffs around by Thanksgiving. Hey, listen, brother, that's okay. That's okay. And am I wrong from time to time? Of course. So if you're right about that and I'm wrong about it, I'll tell you. And then I said, way to go, Dirge, way to get that right, okay? Wang Jun says, if your lies are even too stupid for Alex Jones, just give up. That's a great point. Adam Crispin on YouTube member section says, Cenk, I saw you last night on Leland Vitter's program. Good job. Did you see where on the previous night he fact-checked O'Reilly on live TV? Yeah, I actually saw that he did a good job on that. It was a good job by Leland, all right. They didn't quite believe my theory, but the more that Batya talked about, no, we should move on from Epstein. No, we should get, I've debated on her Israel, huge Israel supporter. Every time she said we should move on, I thought, yeah, it's Israel. It could make me more and more convinced it's Israel.
I enjoy his message. I'm not one of those people that believes everything he says. However, he puts an interesting spin on turning the frogs gay, for example.
Tears my guts out.
All right, back on TYT Cenk and Anna with you guys. Casper.
You know, it's time for an update on America's soon-to-be Golden Dome, maybe? Let's watch.
Watchtower, this is Looking Glass. We have a missile launch detection.
Confirmed. We have missile warning. Confirmed threat and report confidence.
Continuous tracking confirmed. Inbound threat confidence is high.
Engagement authorized.
Interceptor onboard targeting active. Multiple objects detected. Target assignment initiated.
Well, the video you just watched is attempting to hype up what the possibilities for the so-called Golden Dome might be. And it was released by a defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, back in March, which received, by the way, $25 billion in government contracts to carry out President Donald Trump's missile defense shield, or at least what he has proposed to be a missile defense shield, similar to the Iron Dome here in the United States. And now you have defense contractors and tech firms alike lining up to get their piece of taxpayer money, their piece of the pie. So here's a list of the firms that are either attached to the Golden Dome already or are currently lobbying hard for their involvement for the Golden Dome. According to reporting from Sludge, you have a bunch of companies I've never heard of, and Anduril, Boeing, Hermes, L3 Harris, Lockheed Martin, Palantir, which is unsurprising. Palantir likes to get its grubby little hands on everything, RTX, and SpaceX. Now, given Elon Musk's falling out with Trump, I don't know if he's going to get any government contracts here for the Golden Dome, but the Golden Dome is intended to be a missile defense system similar to that of Israel's Iron Dome. Now, notably, there are some, I guess, geographical differences between Israel and the United States. The United States is massive, giant landmass. Israel is a small country where the Iron Dome is, possible. But it would also include missile sensors in space, hence why SpaceX shows up on that list. And of course, that's for the Golden Dome. And we did cover this alarming detail in April. SpaceX has proposed setting up its role in Golden Dome as a subscription service in which the government would pay for access to the technology rather than own the system outright. So not only will American citizens not own anything and like it, these corporations are looking to make it so the US government owns nothing and apparently would be at the mercy of corporations, right? As if corporations don't rule this country already. Now, keep in mind that $25 billion is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the project. And that's what Lockheed Martin was able to enjoy in the form of a government contract. Now, in May, Trump announced that he had selected a $175 billion design for the Golden Dome to be funded through the end of his term. But let's keep it real, folks. That's a laughable underestimate of how much this Golden Dome project would really cost. So that same month as a Trump statement, the Congressional Budget Office projected the total cost of the system over 20 years would be closer to $542 billion. But even that, I think, would be an underestimate. Independent Senator Angus King, extrapolating from a Department of Defense initiative, has warned that the price tag to cover America could reach $6.2 trillion. And look, this has opened up yet another opportunity for defense contractors to spend big on lobbying, spend big on bribing the government in order to get far bigger government contracts as they participate in the construction of the Golden Dome. So according to Open Secrets, defense firms spent over $149 million on federal lobbying last year. And that's the highest number since 2010. But that $150 million actually pales in comparison to the amount of money that these firms receive from the government. So a new report shows the extent of public funding flowing to privately held weapons companies from 2020 to 2024, $2.4 trillion in Pentagon contracts, making up around 54% of the Department of Defense's discretionary spending. And just 5 companies, Lockheed Martin, RTX, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, received over $770 billion of that amount. And all the while, the revolving door just keeps turning. Over 1 dozen defense officials from the Biden administration now work at these defense companies. Cenk, back over to you.
Yeah, so we're asking a pretty simple question on the live chat today. Who will benefit the most from Golden Dome? A, Americans. Already it's laughable, right? B, defense contractors. C, Elon Musk. And obviously, defense contractors are winning that poll. I'm always curious about the 5% that vote for something like, yeah, Americans are going to benefit from Golden Dome. I assume you have to be on the right because no one on the left wants it, and Trump is proposing it. But weren't you worried about deficits and the debt? And now we're going to spend trillions on this piece of junk that has no chance of working? Really? We're going to cover Alaska and Texas, and we're going to cover the whole thing? Do you have any idea how astronomical that price would be? But I mean, let's just look at the money that's being spent now. And this is a perfect case of corruption, right? So the defense contractors last year spent $149 million lobbying. That's a lot of money. Now, of course, in mainstream media, they'll say that has no effect on the politicians. They received about $150 million and they thought, oh, I'm not affected by that at all. No, they got bought. They got bought. All of them got bought for $149 million. So that's an interesting investment. That's a lot of money. How did it turn out for them? Well, I read you the numbers. Already in the last 5 years, they got $2.4 trillion. Trillion. So from Golden Dome alone, which is just a small part, I mean, it's gigantic overall, but it's a small part of the Pentagon budget. They're going to get $175 billion by the time Trump is done. That's pretty much locked in, right? At least that's his plans. $25 billion already got approved. And then look, forget the trillions. The $542 billion is Congressional Budget Office. Nonpartisan, very conservative estimate, right? So there's no way Golden Dome as a project is going to come in under $542 billion. Now, wouldn't you spend $150 million to get 2.4 trillion or 542 billion? Of course you would. That's why they do the corruption, because it pays really well. And so when we get frustrated with Israel and the wars they start and the ones we have to finance, et cetera, remember their partner in crime, literally, their partner in war crimes, are defense contractors from America. Palantir's huge, they very connected to Israel, but you don't have to be connected to Israel. You can just have pressure the politicians for the same thing. Make sure that the American taxpayers have to pay for Israel's weapons, and then we produce them, and you give us the money, and we have to pay for Israel's war, saying, hey, guess what? We win again. We have to pay for Golden Dome, we win again, we win again. They always win because they're the ones who bribe our government officials. So this is very simple, and it's a good, clear case of how we all get robbed. And so if you care about the debt, whether you're on the left or the right, this is going to add an enormous amount to the debt. Even if you thought, hey, maybe it works. Maybe there's a 5%, 25, maybe even 50% chance that it works. You really want to spend at a minimum $540 billion on that gamble? Do you think we're at this point, the 37 trillion in debt? Well, they just added 3 more. 40 trillion in debt, who cares? We'll be fine. Let's give it a shot. Let's roll the dice and spend all this money. What happened to Doge? What happened to all the cuts? Just the 175 billion dwarfs everything in Doge, even if all of Doge was true. So no, this is adding to the debt. Why? Same reason as every single thing that happens in Washington. The donors bribe the politicians and then they get exactly what they want, which is 1,000 or 10,000 times what they put into the politicians.
Bingo. When we come back, an Israeli-American scholar on genocide pens an op-ed for the New York Times calling what Israel is doing a genocide. You do not want to miss the excerpts from his piece. We're going to share that with you and more when we come back.
All right, back on TYT again, reading some of these blind. Let's go to a super chat. Romulus463 says, what's happening in Gaza always happens to unarmed, disfavored populations throughout history. Just one of the reasons why I don't trust government efforts to outlaw firearms. I mean, look, I get what you're saying. Anna's made the same point. And there is this irony in that discussion where gun rights advocates, historically, not today, but have in this country said, well, look, if the Jews in Germany had been armed, it would have been a lot harder to do the Holocaust. That's why arming the population makes sense. So, but then those same guys would then turn around and go, that's why you have to make sure the Palestinians are completely unarmed. They don't have a single arm. In fact, they're not even allowed stones. They're not allowed anything. They're not allowed a pebble. And that's why Israel should get all the weapons and the Palestinians should have none of the weapons. Okay, well, that was enormously hypocritical, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so now we've gotten to a point where things have changed. So the politicians are still saying that, but a lot of the voters are like, no, I get it. I get it. Why is Israel the only country that has a right to defend itself? Why can't the Palestinians defend themselves? Why can't the Iranians defend themselves? Why is that illegal? But Israel, which attacks all of its neighbors, is allowed to defend itself by starting wars. So anyways, you guys get it. Titan said, watching this Golden Dome video made me legitimately sick. Constantine wrote in about Alex Jones, so are the frogs gay? Okay. Grizz, my homie from the streets, writes in, Syria, Israel helped install the terror president and knew he would attack non-Muslims, thus giving reason for Israel to ride in on their pale horse to the rescue. Oh, and to steal the land, of course. Yeah, is Israel's intentions in Syria pure? Come on. How could anyone be that naive and gullible? No, they always take land. They always start the wars, except 1973. You know, I'm a sucker. When I was growing up, I was taught that the Arabs attacked in 1948. I understood that didn't make sense, but that's really what we were taught. And then I was taught, and I believed that the Arabs had attacked in 1967. No, Israel attacked them. Attacked them and wiped out their air force, and that's what they always do. And why they attack Damascus today? Why? They're not allowed to have a military. If they have a military, it's a threat to Israel. That's why we have to obliterate the entire Middle East, because they're a threat to Israel. Well, under that logic, yeah, you're the bad guys. You're the guys who are the imperial empire that is oppressing everyone around you. But that's obvious. Curious Geo writes, in Golden Dome, why not try diplomacy? Why not seek peace rather than more and more weapons? Oh yeah, money, and he has a lot of dollar signs. That's right, this is just nothing but corruption. Tuggan Tubin says, we watched Cenk on News Nation last night. The segment that followed was on New York City mayoral race, and his coverage of Mamdani was over the top gross. Mamdani was characterized both as socialist and communist, and references to Venezuela, which read like right-wing commenters on local news stories on my Facebook feed. I realized how TYT has spoiled me with honest coverage, and when discussed with Marty Beth, Marty agreed. So guys, yeah, every once in a while, check back in with me.
I gotta jump in.
Yeah,
I gotta jump in. Sorry, we'll address it when we come back.
Yep. All right, back on TYT. Anna, during the break, you were about to jump in and say something.
Yeah, so one of our viewers wrote in about, Cenk was on News Nation last night, debating Israel and all of that. And then the segment after, the coverage was on Mamdani, the individual who is poised to win the mayoral race in New York. And they made him out to be all sorts of things that he's not. He's a communist and a socialist, all these negative. Look, honestly, News Nation tends to lean a little more conservative. And when it comes to any issue pertaining to Muslims, they're pretty right wing, like far right. Okay, so that doesn't surprise me. But what does surprise me to some extent is seeing the likes of Van Jones defame Mamdani even today. It's disgusting. Okay, if you don't like his policies, I have no problem debating that or having a conversation about that. But when you lie and say that he's problematic because of the things he's saying about Israel, is he problematic? I don't think that he's anti-Israel. Why? Because he wants Israel to stop slaughtering innocent people? Come on. Van Jones, like, what a disappointment on this issue specifically.
You're forcing me to say something. I'll say two things. First, on mainstream media, dip in every once in a while, check back in. You'll be shocked. Like, they're still doing like unbelievable, outrageous talking points that are obviously not true. It's a factory of lies. It's when you check back in, it's amazing. On Van Jones, tremendous disappointment on that. Have been very friendly with him for a while, allies on some things. Happy to agree, disagree at times, but look, I have to say it, like a significant percentage of the pundits on television are funded by the Israeli lobby. So that's never discussed, it's never pointed out. They're just trotted out there as if they're honest. Oh, they're on the left. Oh, they're on the right. But I don't know about Van Jones at all. I don't know who he's funded by. But I do know about some of the other pundits that are in a very similar situation. And their entire career was built by the Israeli lobby. And why? And especially minorities. So that whenever Israel is accused of being racist against Palestinians or bigoted against Muslims, they could have an African-American pundit on the left come out and go, no, Israel's not racist. You're all anti-Semites. Get Mamdani out of here, etc. So I don't know anything about Van's money, but I do know money is an enormous factor, and that those channels are never honest about it. They never tell you about the history of financing of those pundits by the Israeli lobby.
Yeah, and look, just don't lie about Mamdani. Don't lie about what he has allegedly said when it's not true. That's my big issue with him. If you see that Israel is infallible in your eyes, you think Israel can never do any wrong. I mean, obviously, I'm in deep disagreement with you. But that's your opinion. When you're lying about someone, when you're questioning someone's character like that based on defamatory claims, I'm not very happy about that. Let's just leave it there. All right, I want to fit in one more story before we move over to our members only section of the show, tyt.com/join to become a member, by the way. Let's talk a little bit about this incredible opinion piece that was written for the New York Times.
There is this very strong sense in Israel, among many people across the board, that yes, maybe some things are not going well, maybe there's some indiscipline in the army, but by and large, our boys, and these the people who are fighting there are the children and grandchildren of most people in Israel, cannot be involved in this systematic campaign of war crimes and genocide. And unfortunately, the reality is that they are.
Well, the individual that you just heard call out Israel's war crimes this past December is Israeli-American scholar Omer Bartov, who has just penned a new op-ed for the New York Times. It's important to note he is a genocide scholar, and in his latest piece, he says, "I'm a genocide scholar. I know it when I see it." And he's referring to what the Israeli government, with the help of the Israeli Defense Forces, is up to in Gaza. Now, Dr. Bartov is a professor of Holocaust and genocide studies, specifically at Brown University. And in this essay, he explains that while he acknowledged that the IDF was likely committing war crimes soon after October 7th, he disagreed with assessments that Israel was committing a genocide. He was really resisting that notion. And you can understand why. I mean, he's Israeli American. It calls his identity into question, but his take has totally changed, and it changed beginning in May of 2024 when Israel ordered about 1 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah to move to the coastal area of Mawasi. Now, the army then proceeded to level much of Rafah, destroy it. At that point, it appeared no longer, he writes, no longer possible to deny that the pattern of IDF operations was consistent with the statements denoting genocidal intent made by Israeli leaders in the days after the Hamas attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised that the enemy would pay a huge price for the attack and that the IDF would turn parts of Gaza, where Hamas was operating, into rubble. And he called on the residents of Gaza to leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. And he says he then began to notice a pattern in Israel's intentional targeting of civilian life in Gaza. Take a look.
If you look at the pattern of what the IDF has been doing, not only has it been moving the population around, and every safe zone that it ends up in tends to get also bombed and shelled and attacked from the air, but also systematically destroying universities, schools, mosques, museums, and hospitals, of course, anything that makes for the health and also the culture of a group.
So this is why he just wrote for the Times, quote, I believe the goal was and remains today to force the population to leave the strip altogether, or considering that it has nowhere to go, to debilitate the enclave through bombings and severe deprivation of food, clean water, sanitation, and medical aid to such an extent that it is impossible for sanitation and medical aid for Palestinians in Gaza to maintain or reconstitute their existence as a group. He also writes the following, Cenk, my inescapable conclusion has become that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. Having grown up in a Zionist home, lived the first half of my life in Israel, served in the IDF as a soldier and officer, and spent most of my career researching and writing on war crimes and the Holocaust. This was a painful conclusion to reach and one that I resisted as long as I could. But I have been teaching classes on genocide for a quarter of a century. I can recognize one when I see one. And by the way, the estimated death toll, which I think is an underestimate, is that more than 58,000 people, including more than 17,000 children, have been killed in Gaza. And by the way, a point that Cenk has been repeating recently, and it's an important point to make, more than 870 of those children were less than 1 year old. Cenk.
Yeah, and that's more than all the civilians Hamas killed on October 7th. Adults, males, women, children, etc. was 815. Already, Israel has killed 870 babies alone in Gaza. Okay, so now when this conflict started, and for the great majority of it, when I stated a fact like that, people would say, "Oh, that's blood libel," right? So when they say that, what they're saying is the killing of the 870 babies doesn't bother me that much. But you stating that fact offends me because I think that it's related to something that happened in the 1800s. So because of that like winding connection, I'm offended at you repeating that fact. Well, how about the dead babies? Oh no, I'm not worried about them at all. I mean, I'll pay lip service to them, but I'm not gonna do anything about that. But you stating that fact about my beloved Israel, it's just unacceptable. So I have to smear you. I have to call you a bigot, and I have to try to eliminate you from the national conversation. Okay, now that's how it started. Now, how's it going now? Well, now things have changed. Not completely. The people in power are still the worst of the worst. And I don't mean just in Israel, I mean also in America. Both Biden and Trump, yes, sir, what can I do, sir? Absolutely, Israel, sir. Oh, by the way, you want to kill these Palestinians and endanger Jews worldwide? That's okay, we don't mind. Just whatever the government of Israel wants, we are here to serve loyally. Because Jews didn't bribe them. The Israeli lobby bribed them. They're not working for Jews, they're working for the government of Israel. AIPAC doesn't represent Jewish Americans. In fact, AIPAC has eliminated several Jewish politicians for daring to say that the Palestinians should have a state. Did you know that there was a group here called Madassa 2000 that created a list? They're kind of like a canary mission now that's making the list of all the peace protesters on college campuses, trying to get the professors fired, make sure that nobody ever gets hired, arrested, deported, all that stuff. There's a precursor that was the group I just mentioned. That group put together a list of 8,000 Jews in America that they said were self-haters. They called them SHIT Jews, and they tried to get those Jews in America fired. It's not about religion.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It really is. And when they invoke the Holocaust and what Hitler did in order to justify the slaughter of innocent people in Gaza today, that's like the most insulting thing in the world, right? Essentially using victims of the Holocaust as pawns for their disgusting efforts to steal more land, steal more territory, wipe Palestinians off the face of the earth. Yeah. I mean, the interview you had today, Cenk, on Piers Morgan's show, well, the interview that aired prior to your debate with the panel on Piers Morgan's show it's unbelievable to me how little shame like the extremists in Israel have, the Israeli settlers specifically. They don't care. They don't see Palestinians as human beings at all.
Yeah, no, that is the godmother of the settlers is who Piers Morgan interviewed, and she's a very proud terrorist. I'll tell you real quick, and then I want to go back to Professor Bartov. Piers asked her, well, are you concerned about the 20,000 children that Israel has killed in Gaza? And she said, well, they shouldn't teach their children to hate Jews. So you murdered their kids because you think they taught them to hate Jews. First of all, a lot of them are under 1 year old. They didn't get taught anything, they're babies. Second of all, you think that they're not going to hate you after you killed 20,000 of their kids. I mean, look at the circular logic, it's insanity, right? Yeah. Okay, now let's get to the good news. The good news is, I believe, I know I don't speak for Jews, of course not, right? What I'm reporting to you in my role here in covering the news is, what I am seeing is what I'm calling a Jewish rebellion. Like, have there been young Jews that were among the best fighters for peace in this country throughout? Yes. And they're heroes, and I love them for it. Have some Jewish American politicians like Bernie Sanders been at the forefront of pushing for peace and dignity for Palestinians and saving their lives? Yes, all throughout, right? Now, and others like we've named 100 times that are media figures like Dave Smith, et cetera, right? But now the battle is joined. So a couple of months ago, we showed you a New York Times op-ed from the rabbi of the largest Jewish congregation in the country, in America. So the largest congregation, their rabbi saying, please stop, Israel, please stop. This is crazy, right? So now Mandy Patinkin with a brilliant speech the other day in an interview saying, oh, after the Holocaust happened to us, how could we do this to anyone else? Please stop, please stop. Robert Greenwald, a legend at Brave New Films. Go to bravenewfilms.org. Gaza journalists under fire, covering how Israel has killed a record number of journalists within the movie. Holocaust survivors going, please stop, please, please, right? So, and now it's spreading and spreading and spreading, and we need that. We need that community to say, don't do this in our name, right? So. And Professor Bartov here, in his explanation of why it's a genocide, said a couple of very powerful things. And he had the great evidence of all of the quotes from the leaders. And he said, as a scholar, when you look to see if something's a genocide, you look for intent. So what we do in any situation is we look for the leaders' statements about what they're gonna do, and then did it match what they did? And he lists all these statements. Oh, we're gonna do total annihilation. We're gonna target the civilians. Netanyahu said, remember, they're like Amalek. And that is a reference to killing everyone in the area, men, women, and children. That's the verse that he's talking about. And so,
yeah.
And then
I gotta add, he also, I didn't know this, I learned through what he wrote for the Times, more than 2,000 families have been wiped out. The Gazan health authorities said, in addition to 5,600 families that now count only one survivor.
Yeah.
So again, I ask you, if a government, if a country has slaughtered every single one of your family members, you're the only one left. How do you not become radicalized? How does this not help Hamas?
Yeah.
It's just absurd.
And he points out, not only did they say those things, but they did those things. So one of the things is the bulldozers. He's like, then why are they bombing in northern Gaza and bulldozing the homes? Well, that is the total annihilation of that area. And now Israel says, yes, we now have 75% of Gaza and we're gonna keep it. The former prime minister, Ehud Olmert, said that little area they're setting up for the Palestinians in southern Gaza is a concentration camp. And it is, that's exactly what it is, okay? So now Professor Bartow finally says, we have lost the credibility that the Holocaust gave us as victims. I'm paraphrasing, please read it yourself because it's so powerful and his words are better than mine, right? He said, now, you can't go around saying, oh, wow, we were the victims, etc. Same thing Mandy Patinkin said, right? And then do it yourself. So I love that these people with good conscience are now coming forward and saying, not in our name, we have got to stop this genocide. Because last thing, Anna, I think a lot of folks who supported Israel, like Professor Bartow, thought, no. I'm, he's saying he's a Zionist. Mandy Patinkin says, he wants Israel to exist and to be safe, etc. Right? But they genuinely thought it was for self-defense, and I can understand why they thought that. But now, when they see that we were right, and it's 2 years later, and they said they were going to take the land. They voted to make sure the Palestinians never have a state, and they see them getting put in a concentration camp and sometimes starved to death. They go, no, I didn't sign up for this. I thought that was like conspiracy theories or something. No, you guys are actually doing it. You're actually doing it. That's horrible, horrific. And they don't want that on their conscience, and I love them for it. Let's all unite and make sure that Israel is not allowed to do this. And by the way, if you want to take real action, just yelling at Trump or Biden doesn't work at all. AIPAC just buys them. That's just the reality of it, and almost all of Congress. No, we have to stop sending money to Israel because it is enabling their worst instincts. It's not helping Israel. At this point, it's not only hurting the Palestinians and hurting the entire Middle East and the world, but it's also hurting Israel itself. Because we're saying, oh, you want to do a genocide? Here's more money and more money to do it. We have to stop that money, and we as a people have to unite on it and force our politicians to stop.
All right, in our bonus episode for our members, we're gonna talk about what Andrew Cuomo is attempting to do in his dirty tricks to try to beat Mamdani in the mayoral race in New York City. We're gonna talk about Josh Hawley, a Republican senator who likes to really present himself as an economic populist, but is he serious about it? Lots to get to. TYT.com/join to become a member. We'll see you there.